In this video I will show you how much the Boxster 981 loses per year and why this generation is the one you want. What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. Now we all know it. The 981 generation is the last Boxster generation which received that sweet sounding 6-cylinder in the base and the S version. Porsche of course introduced the 4-liter GTS, but let's face it, they are priced at such a high level that it becomes unattainable for many of us. In my mind, the 981 is then also the ultimate Boxster, and that is not just because of the 6-cylinder. Also the values are pretty good. In this video I will show you how good, and I will show that to you with a few steps. First, we will have a look at the Boxster market and some general price levels. And all of these numbers will be split between the base, the S, the GTS and the Spyder. And that goes by the way also for the rest of the video. In the second step I will show you the depreciation numbers, such as the depreciation per year and per 1000 miles driven. After that we will compare the 981 market to the 718 market, and this will show us if the 981s kept their values better than the 718s. So I highly recommend that you stick around for this one. In the fourth step we will put all of these numbers in a context, as we will compare how the rates of the Boxster compare to the other cars which I have analyzed on the channel. This is by the way the second video in a series which covers the full Boxster market. In the previous video we had a look to the 718, and that you can check out by clicking on the pop-up banner over here. Now then, let's start with step number 1, and that means that the Boxster market is appearing now on your screen. You can see that we have the model year on the horizontal axis, the price on the vertical axis, and that each car is represented by a bubble. You can also see that we have the Spyder, the GTS, the S and the base. Let me run you through some general numbers so you get a feeling for the market. There are 113 cars for sale, and the majority of the market is made up out of the base models. What also surprised me is that there are more Spyders than GTSs for sale. I always thought that the Spyders were more rare. The prices differ of course for the different models. The base version is the cheapest with a median price of $39,000. This is followed by the S, which tends to cost around $44,000, and the GTS, which is clearly more expensive with $68,000. The Spyder sits of course at the top with a median price of $89,000. And since we know now a bit about the market, let's move on to the depreciation numbers, and we will cover both the depreciation per year and per 1000 miles driven. The first graph, the one for the depreciation per year, is now appearing on your screen, and you can see that I inserted the depreciation curves in the graph. Let's talk numbers. The base version loses on average $2,800 per year, and for the S this is $5,500 per year. Unfortunately, for the GTS we don't have enough data points, and as a result you can see that the line is sloping upwards. And this by the way doesn't mean that they are going up in value. It does however signal that the depreciation per year is very low. Now for the Spyder you can see that we don't have a depreciation curve because there's only one model year available. Now then, what insights can we get exactly from this graph? First, you can see that the base models show quite a strong bottom. Between model year 2014 and 2013, the median price only drops by $800. Now we don't have too many data points in model year 2014, but nevertheless, I would say that this looks very good. For the S model we can also see a bottom in the market, but not as strong as for the base. The median price points between model year 2014 and 2013 still dropped by $1,400. However, for both models, this drop is clearly lower than their averages. So they are bottoming. Now just as in other Porsche markets, we can also see that the premium what you pay for an S model fades away when the car ages. For a 2015 car, the premium is $8,300, and for a 2013 car, only $3,600 is left. So in other words, the older the car, the more attractive the S model becomes value-wise. I do then also recommend to go for an S model from model year 2014 or 13. So what about the GTS? As I mentioned before, we can't really say anything about the depreciation line on the screen. However, when we look at the prices, then we can see that the premium for one compared to the S is large. In fact, this is much larger than I expected. But then again, this is also what we saw in the 981 Cayman market. And if you want to know more about that, then I recommend that you check out that video by clicking on the pop-up banner over here. Now finally then, the Spyder. We have only one model year available and therefore no depreciation curve. We know though that when these were sold 4 years ago, the MSRP for one without options was around $83,000. So I think it is fair to conclude that the Spyder kept its value well. I, by the way, also checked for all of the model types if there was a difference in depreciation for the manuals and the automatic cars, but this was not the case. So then, it will of course be very interesting to see how these rates compare to the 718. But before we go to that, let's first have a look at the depreciation per 1000 miles driven. The graph for that is appearing now on your screen, and you can see that instead of the model year we have the mileage on the horizontal axis. Again, let's first cover the numbers. The base model loses on average $520 per 1000 miles driven, and for the S this is $880. For the GTS this is a bit higher with $1,150. Finally then, you can see that the Spyder is the most sensitive to mileage with a rate of $13,200 per 1000 miles driven. Now what I think is interesting to point out from this graph is the overlap between the S and the base models. You can see that for the same mileage, you have in many cases the possibility to go for an S and the base model. They might of course differ in their spec level, but you get more power in return. And since we covered now all of the statistics for the 981 Boxster market, it is time to compare them to the 718 Boxster market. We of course want to find out whether the 981 kept its value better due to the 6-cylinder. Before we move on to that comparison though, if you like this video, please remember to support the channel by smashing that like button. The 981 and 718 market are now appearing on your screen, and you can see that we are looking at the depreciation per year graph. And again, if you want to know more about the 718 market, then I recommend that you check out my full market analysis for that car. The link to that video is included down below in the description. Let's start with the S and the base models. You can see that when we jump from model year 2017 to 2016 or 2015, that there is not really a break in the values. In fact, it is possible to fit quite a decent depreciation curve for the base and the S model to the whole market. And that you can see now on the right hand side. So what exactly does this mean? Normally, when a new model is introduced and it is significantly better than its predecessor, you will always find a break in the prices at the point of introduction. And as you can see, that's not the case here. So in other words, the prices reflect that the 718 isn't an improvement over the 981. And as a result, you can see in the graph at the right that the values align quite good. So in that sense, the values of the 981 are quite strong, or the values of the 718 are quite weak. It depends on how you look at it. On the other hand, this effect can't be exaggerated. We still see that values of the more recent 981s are decreasing, so it is not like they are completely flat while the 718s are in a free fall. Let's keep that in mind here. Now I also checked the depreciation per 1000 miles graph, and there you also saw that the values are overlapping nicely, further reinforcing our earlier conclusion. In fact, this is actually the same behavior as what we can see in the Cayman market. And if you're interested in that, then I recommend that you check out the full video by clicking on the pop-up banner right over here. Now what is amplified by the graph on the right, and let me make that a bit bigger, is that the premium of the S fades away. You can clearly see that in model year 2020 this premium is somewhere around $20,000, while it is almost non-existent for model year 2014 and 13. So again, I think that the slightly older S models offer extremely good value for money. Now then, the GTS. For that car the story is completely different. But before we look into that, let me reiterate that we only have a few data points available and that you need to interpret the conclusions with some care. What we can see here is that there is a large difference between the two markets. To be more precise, we can see that the 981 GTS values are extremely strong. If you were to extrapolate the depreciation curve of the 718, you would end up with values much lower than the current 981 GTS values. And this is also clearly visible in the GTS premiums. You can see that these are much larger in the 981 market than that they are in the 718 market. And funny enough, that is also exactly what is happening in the Cayman market. So in that sense, the Boxster and the Cayman market are mirroring each other quite well. Now finally then, the Spyders. Comparing the two Spyder generations over here is not particularly useful. They are different cars with different starting prices, and therefore we won't investigate this further. Alright, before we conclude, I still want to show you one more thing. And this is something which you absolutely shouldn't forget when you are in the market for a Boxster. And that is how these rates stack up against other cars. That we can find out with the depreciation leaderboard. This leaderboard compares the relative average depreciation rates of the cars which are analyzed on this channel, while also accounting for the age. And it is that leaderboard which is now appearing on your screen, and you can see that we have the age of a car market on the horizontal axis and the depreciation on the vertical axis. If we find the base version of the Boxster, then we can see that it scores really good with a rate of -6.1%. And this puts it above the trend line and in the same league as the 991.1 Turbo. The S scores a lot worse with a rate of -10%. And this is way below the trend. However, we already saw in the depreciation curves that we could expect such a difference. After all, we saw that the premium for the S fades away over time, and as a result, the depreciation is higher. And on that note, let's wrap up this video and conclude. So why do I think that the 981 is the sweet spot of the Boxster generations? First, and this is subjective, I think that it looks great. The oldest cars are now 7 years old, but I think it still looks very fresh. Second, and this is of course an obvious reason, they come with that sweet sounding 6-cylinder engine. But for those 2 points you of course didn't need to watch the video. So let's talk values. Point number 3. The 981 offers extremely good value for money and, if picked right, comes with minimal depreciation. The car is cheaper than the newer 718, and we saw that the depreciation rates for the older model years are extremely low. In any case, much lower than on a 718. Moreover, compared to the 718, we saw that there is no clear break in the market, signaling that this generation is not discounted compared to the 718. Rather, it shows the opposite, and especially for the GTS models. I would however go for an S model and not a GTS. We saw namely that the premium for an S is relatively small, while the premium for a GTS is quite significant. And to me, this premium doesn't justify the small amount of extra pleasure which you get with the GTS. Moreover, we all know that the new 4-liter GTS is right around the corner. I do then also think that they will reduce some of the GTS's premiums in the 981 market. With an MSRP of around $90,000, a price of $80,000 for a 981 GTS is in my mind too high. Nevertheless, I expect that the premiums for the 981 GTS will remain higher than the premiums for the 718 GTS. And on that note, we are going to close this video. Now, if you enjoyed it, please remember to support the channel by smashing that like button. Also, if you like these type of analysis but would have liked to see it for a different car, then I recommend that you comment the name of the car down below in the comment section. Once there are enough people requesting a certain car, I will make a video about it. As always, a huge thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.